Yo, it is MIO here, back again with another video, and today we're going to be talking about a certain manga known as Ajin. It also had an anime adaptation, but we don't talk about that because it was 3D, which means it's poopy. Very poopy. So now moving on to the basic plot of Ajin. So what happens in Ajin is basically there are these 7 demi-human creatures that were discovered 17 years ago as of the canon point in the manga. And basically what happens with demi-humans are that they are basically immortal until they come to the end of their regular lifespan. So they can die as many times from sickness or anything else, but once they reach their old age, then they will actually die. And the other thing that happens with demi-humans is basically they have these IBM creatures is what they're called, which is basically just particles that were manifested into an actual being that can fight and defend them from the rest of the world. And the reason why they need to defend themselves from the rest of the world is because the large populace only sees demi-humans as something that's entirely not human at all, and something that even lacks like certain maybe cognitive functions like just emotions or anything else. And once they find a demi-human, then they can exchange them for money, or that's at least what the public is told, but nobody has actually received money from capturing a demi-human. And at the beginning of the story, we only know that there are 46 confirmed cases until we meet our main character, whose name is Kei Nagai. And basically what happens with him is that he was studying to be a doctor, but then one day when he was walking down the street, he got hit by a truck, and then he discovered that he was in fact a demi-human as well. So basically with demi-humans, you don't know you are a demi-human until you get into some life or death situation, and if you die, then you either die or you come back to life, and that's basically it. And what happened when he came back to life is that everyone basically betrayed him, and then everyone in the country was after him. And then in his attempt to run away and just basically defect from normal society, he ran into a few other demi-humans, 2 of them that were the main ones, and their names are Tanaka and Sato. Sato is probably my favorite and the most interesting character in the entire series, and he ends up being basically the main villain by the end of the story. And what happens with him is that he is basically just unpredictable at all points, and you never see what he has coming next. And at first he wanted to accept Kei into his group, but then he actually reported Kei to the authorities to see what he would do after he got captured by the humans. And what the regular humans wanted to do with the demi-humans is that they experiment on them constantly, basically just making a mockery of human life and just finding out if they can use them for any sorts of experiments, like drugs, anything else, like basically just using them as lab rats but actual humans instead. So what happens after this is that they come to rescue Kei after all, and then they try to see what happened to his character after he was tortured by the humans, but he still retains some amount of semblance of just like basically being a nice guy. And that's when Sato rejects him from his group, because basically he's not insane enough for them. And that's how the plot ends up moving forward. So Kei ends up separating from that group and eventually starts wanting to take down Sato. And Sato, as the story continues, he continues to commit more and more atrocities that could seem absolutely insane in our world, but he does not care about any of the regular humans, because of course none of them care about the 47 demi-humans. And then we find out that there are probably more demi-humans that were just in hiding, and then we get to see like a bunch of different examples of how they could work and function in our society, basically just being hidden or being used for other purposes. Like one of the demi-humans, who is this woman named Izumi Shinomura, and basically what's up with her is that she is basically a demi-human that's working for the government, and she is also working for specifically under a man named Yu Tosaka, and he is pretty close to the prime minister in his position, and he's one of the main people that oversees the treatment and what's going to happen to basically the demi-humans in their future. And Although he is an interesting character, he doesn't play as big of a role as some of the other characters involved once it gets closer to the climax of the series. And Izumi, who I mentioned before, who was working under him, she actually plays more of a pivotal role in the story because she shows somebody that is able to basically have compassion even after becoming a demi-human. And we find out a lot later about demi-humans from my second favorite character in the show, who is this doctor basically named Dr. Ogura, and he is an interesting example because he's basically just a scientist. He's the one who discovered everything about the IBMs, which are those same creatures that the demi-humans can control and create. And he is a man of science, of course, but he also believes and basically came up with a theory of how demi-humans were made. And what he said was that they're basically created from the human heart, and it's basically a thing of evolution. And he talks about science in a really interesting way, and basically just the fate of the universe, because everything is fated to happen as if this was just another part of human evolution, and he believes that wholeheartedly. And what happens with a lot of demi-humans when they are created is basically what happens with them is that they discover something about human life, which is evoked by some kind of emotion when something happens that involves human life. For instance, K was believed to have become a demi-human by us when he was a child, and basically what happened with him was that he lost a pet, but in that moment he was really thinking about life and death, and then he was first able to summon his first IBM, which basically is brought by an emotion that is evoked because of someone dealing with either the loss of life or really just contemplating life in general. And that's how they end up keeping their IBMs until they eventually reach the end of their lifespans. And each of them becomes obviously more insane, or they just learn more about life from their experiences. And every time they die, it's kind of just like something about them learning. Well, not usually every time they die, because depending on the demi-human, they could die a lot and just use it in ways that benefit them. Including one of their abilities, which is basically just this thing of like, they would chop off one of their arms and then they would die, or their body would get some kind of incinerated by somebody in some way. And so since their body regenerates in the largest part of them that was previously there, then they would end up actually just regenerating from that one arm. So for instance, if you chopped off your arm, but then you actually just stayed alive with the rest of your body, and you put that piece of your chopped off arm and you put it against a wall and then shot yourself, then you could basically just manifest that arm. But since it has to exist in a space, then it would be able to break through that wall, basically just destroying matter. So there are other ways to create like this kind of basically hacks of the universe, and this is just considered human evolution. But it brings up an interesting point of how we perceive human evolution and all these other things, because a lot of people think human evolution is us with technology, but it could be evoked by something like the human heart. And although I don't think that's what regular evolution is like, it makes an interesting point as to how people deal with life and death, and just how it could allow them to evolve not just as people, but basically manifesting that in a physical way as well. And that is like the complete opposite of someone like Sato, who doesn't actually care as much about life and death, and he's the main villain that I mentioned earlier. And he has been living for a long time, and he used to be a soldier, so it basically changed his perspective a lot on life and death, since he had seen like a lot of people die when he had participated in the Vietnam War. So what happens with him is that he has no value or care for life literally at all, so he does not mind killing anyone or anything. And that, besides making him absolutely insane, it makes him a very interesting character that doesn't have any boundaries that any normal person would think was absolutely insane, but he can just do it unconditionally. And since he obviously doesn't die, he doesn't care about the world order or anything else. So basically what he was doing for the major part of the manga was basically just trying to take over Japan just for the fun of it. And besides just other characters coming into play like Tanaka, who wanted revenge on the country at first, then that's just basically what ended up happening with him. So it just goes to show how people's perspectives can change based on where they're from and what they're doing, which is what I really appreciate about the manga. So yeah, I'd say it's about 8 out of 10 manga. And that's it for the video. Please do like, comment, subscribe, and all that other stuff, and I'll see you tomorrow.